Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. I will bring this meeting to order at 6:01 tonight. Would you all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and we've got a modification of agenda. Yeah, thank you.
I'll move to modify the agenda, placing an addendum within the personnel consent agenda.
Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Let's begin by talking about board recognition. I know there's quite a bit to celebrate. I think we're all feeling the aftermath of the bond, so let's kind of pause that conversation for a little bit later in the agenda. But we have a lot of great things to celebrate in the district, so I'll open the floor to the board for any recognition.
Well, I want to jump in and do Laura Thorson, since she was my former student. She visited the Capitol building last month with other leaders in CTE organizations. The other thing that isn't on here is that besides the big event at the Cumberland this weekend with our wrestlers, the WASNet is off tonight on their very first tournament in Elma at the Grays Harbor Fairgrounds. And so there's 6 girls, well, not all 6 are there, one is sick and the other one's at the wrestling. So the girls are there having their very first ever, for the very first team we have ever.
That's exciting. That's exciting. So proud of those girls.
We know February is kind of a month of recognition for specific things. Obviously, the most obvious is Black History Month, so I'm just going to put that out. It's something that we've become, kind of in my own personal opinion, very accustomed to February recognition. But the one thing I'm really proud of with Orting is that that's not the only time you see those recognitions, and it's kind of a year-long recognition of people in general. And so I just want to just kind of say that also in February is CTE, and it's becoming more and more prevalent that that's what our students want, is those kinds of programs, and our parents are loving those kinds of programs. So I know that there's a whole bunch of stuff on here that I didn't really read, but as far as the details of our CTE programs, but I will say that I have gotten to know some of our FFA kids, and you know, I just loved that sheep AJ last time. So that was a great time. Those programs are awesome. I'm really happy to see them, and I can't wait to get more and more involved in those with our students here.
Well, I'm going to give a shout out. They're not here, but Miss Veldkamp and Miss Basket. Miss Basket, they're teaching Black History Month, and my granddaughter's in their grade, third grade, and she was talking to me last night, and it was like, I can't believe what she knows. It's like she's telling me all about just different things that have happened and how they explained it to her, and she was so into it, and I thought, you know, that's a good teaching right there, because she has really taken it to heart and really learned some things from them. So even though they're not here, I would like to thank Veldkamp and Basket for that. And also the wrestlers, of course. Of course, you know how my house is the stomping ground, and we had some wrestlers over today, and they're very excited about going tomorrow, and they're filling up on top ramen and interesting, but yeah, they're so excited for them because they feel so good about it. And we had Dom over, and I think he is like rated first in state or something, so that was really exciting to see.
Wow. I want to give a shout out to I would say middle school sports right now. I know my daughter's playing over there, and I went to some soccer games this week, and just the turnout is unbelievable in middle school sports, let me say that. So, you know, that's saying a lot to our kids getting buy-in in the schools and wanting to be part of a team. And so, yeah, I wanted to say that. And I'm going to say, obviously on here, counselors at the schools, right? This is the month for them too. So shout out to those that do that and work with our students.
Yeah, I agree. I think our counselors have, they carry so much of the students. You know, we talk about mental health and just the well-being of our students and our staff, and I think our counselors probably feel that. I can't say more than others because I don't know personally, but they just carry that workload and that just that burden on their heart to make sure our students are well. So they absolutely deserve a shout out and recognition this month. I'd also like to recognize our community who came out in force to celebrate senior night at boys basketball, girls basketball, wrestling. And speaking of our wrestling program, I got to witness how the high school wrestling program honored and recognized the upcoming wrestlers.
Yeah.
I've never seen that done so well, where they really, it's like a graduation
Yeah.
moment, you know, where they go from the
Nice.
junior program or from the middle school into the high school wrestling program, and just how they really wrap their arms around the families and all the siblings. It was really an impressive thing to see. And so just a shout out to the program for being so strong, for the parents, the Booster Club supporting the organizations, for all of basketball too. It's just really neat to see our community come together and support kids in so many different ways. So, very good. Anything else? All right, cool. Now I will open the floor. We have a few people signed up to speak, so I'd like to invite Darla and John Winters up to address the board. You have 3 minutes. It looks like your topic is continued support of staff with the incoming students.
There, sorry.
Yes, please. Please come to the microphone. We're being recorded, so we want to make sure the community is able to hear you as well.
Well, John's on his way, I'm sorry, he had grandkid duty. So, I'm Darla Winters, and my husband, John, we've been in this community for 4 years now. We have a little granddaughter, Carly. She is in OPS, in Miss Olney's class, 1st grade. And then our oldest granddaughter, Callie, is in 7th grade this year at the middle school. So I think working with the kids and being in the schools and volunteering, and I volunteer at the Haven as well. I think one of our main concerns is with the kids showing up, coming in, with those 4,500 new homes being built. I guess my concern is the support for the staff. You know, what are the matrix? What will happen when there's 100 more kids come in? Not just the office staff, the custodians, the paras, everything that we have. Do we just keep adding on, or are we able to get more staff? Are we able to get more support? I just wanted to know where we're going with that. Especially now, unfortunately, that the bond didn't get passed. We're very disappointed with that. That was just my question, is basically, what are we doing with continued support?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think there's a lot of pieces to that, and that's something that we'd love to follow up with you after the meeting, Darla, and just kind of fill you in on what that process looks like, how those decisions are made, and we've got your contact information here, so we can circle back around with you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now I'd like to invite Matt Carlson to talk about the school law.
I got us top much here.
Is that gonna stay?
3 minutes, I'm gonna use all of them. All right, board. I'm not here in an official capacity tonight. I'm just here as a dad and community member. My voice is hoarse because I've been coaching basketball, and, on a date, and what is it called? Moonlighting? As a volunteer coach in my spare time. My voice is gone because I coached 3 games over the weekend, and my team won its first game Saturday night, 24-23.
I love that.
And I tell you that story because I screamed my heart out during that game, knowing that it took every ounce of my passion, my drive, everything that was in me to navigate middle school boys to get a win by 1 point. It took everything. The last 48 hours have hurt, right? We all feel the loss, there's anger. But I know that hope is still here on the horizon. We got a lot of fighting still to do. This bond isn't dead in the water. And I'm here tonight to say to the board, let's go do this again. We now know what we need to do. 55%. The community is with us. We got to mobilize even more now. Listen, 24-23 is a win. That was a big win, but it was by 1 point, and it took it right down to the wire. And that means we got to go out and get some votes, that people that didn't vote, right? And I know you know this, but I just want you to know, in the last 48 hours, I've talked to parents, community members, kids in our school. They deeply desire this thing to pass. And I know there's an opportunity for the board to weigh in on this the next couple of days to figure out if we're going to rerun this bond. And I say, we are behind you, the community is behind you, and we respect your leadership. And I'm going to close with this. Tonight I was driving down here, I might as well just throw this one in there. My son had to go to the doctor today. I won't go into his medical concerns, but I'll just say this. He had a little freak out moment in the doctor's office. And I kind of had to play the dad thing and lead him through that and help him be a little tough so he could get a little treatment. He didn't want it, he started crying. And we were driving down here and I had football practice, and unprovoked, he says to me, Dad, I just want to thank you because you helped me get through a really hard time today. And I'm telling you, board, that I want to say thank you for helping us get through really hard times. And I know that we have a couple of weight room sessions to put in here in the next couple months if we go for this, but I want you to know we're behind you. We can do this. And your leadership, we're going to look back on this to all of you as leaders and say, thank you for stepping up for our kids in this community and doing what you've done. Let's go do this thing again. That's all I want to say. You got our support, okay? All right.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
That's it.
Really?
Say the end.
I don't want to go. I don't want to go. Happy to share some information, include a little bit of a follow-up on my report with regard to things you've asked me to do over the last couple of days, which is dig a little deeper and talk a little bit to you about pros and cons and what we see moving forward with regard to that decision. I just want to look back in time a little bit and celebrate some of the good that has happened here. Family engagement. I don't know how we made this up. I've never seen it happen in my career, but it was one of the certainly highlights where we involved our students in giving us feedback about what are their ideas, what are their hopes, what are their dreams, and yeah, Matt got me. But the capacity of what they shared in their thoughts and tapping into their dreams was just super powerful. There we see Evelyn. I have my signed copy of our star on the magazine, and she was in force and was able to share ideas. And just look at the smiles on their faces. And I would say, hold those, because when you make hard decisions, keep that in mind. And I know it's not easy. We put some of those into a video. Brittany was very creative. I appreciated her every step of the way. But I'd like to share just a video of and so we hear and see their voice and their thinking. I thought this was really powerful, getting that out there.
There were some skeletons in there and zombies, and zombies just pop out of nowhere and it's pitch black. And I did a swing and the seesaw and the sandbox, and I put pen and tape where you can a music section where there should be like maybe like an outdoor or whole music section. So people don't really want to play, they can just do music outside. And like, maybe like a kitchen so that if people want to do something. And then, yeah, it would be fun. You gotta have a big slide.
We could go on for about 20 minutes more, just hearing the incredible ideas and passion and enthusiasm. So definitely got to see some dreams, and when we look at just the magnitude of community engagement, I know transparency and communication have been priorities of yours as a board, and I just started to list the things that have happened over the last 6 months to a year, and we just have opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to get our message out. And that was not only just about our story, but about the engagement in the democratic process, messages around voting and registering to vote, and to be active, whichever way you happen to lean. And then we had the opportunity Tuesday to test the waters, and unfortunately, and fortunately, great things and bad things happened. Great things, we saw record turnout. We haven't seen an election of our population with results this high, both on yeses and nos. We saw a record number of yeses. When you look at the entirety of the bond measures in the state of Washington, there were 8, not one passed. But of those data points, we had the 3rd highest percentage of yes. And although that's not the results many of us hoped for, it was way better than where some other systems were. And to me, that shows the majority of our voting community is behind this idea. So I take a lot of just pride in that work to help to get there, because we know times are tough. We know financial decisions are challenging people every single day. And when we think about what kids need and our opportunities moving forward, I know that puts schools, unfortunately, smack dab in the middle of taxes and politics. And that's the worst place that we'd rather find ourselves, but that's where you are. We're between politicians and funding decisions, and then having to ask community, because like it or not, if we ever desire to build something new, that can only happen with community support. There's no magic pot from the state of Washington. So those are the results of yesterday. This decision looks like that's going to be final. It'll creep up with votes over the next 2 weeks, but not by a substantive amount. I don't see a way where this one would turn into a yes by the 24th. So some of you started to ask me for some information. Okay, what does this mean? What are our options? What would it look like? So we did some digging with Liz and with Matt, our friends with Piper Sandler, looking at taxes, and I have some good news and then some counters as you think about where to go next. So the deadline to think about an option or a measure for April, the April 25th special election, is next Friday. So there's not a lot of time to make a decision, unfortunately, if you desire to do that. What we looked and asked based on your feedback is what would happen if we ran the same package in April? Well, some things happened from a year to a year and a half ago when we did our initial cost estimation. Remember, voters approve amounts. They don't approve rates. We have to guesstimate the rates based on a variety of factors of what's happening with home growth and interest rates and things of that nature. And Trevor said, well, look, your developers, and when we met just a few weeks ago, said they're a year or 2 behind on their schedule. If that's true, you may not need to go ask for bond number 2 in 2027. That might not happen until 2028. So he ran the numbers, and what he found is that actually lowers the estimated tax obligation. So if you were to run the same package in April, it would be 35 cents estimate less than what we previously estimated. When you factor what that cost in with the levy, that's about a $4.20 overall tax rate. We were previously estimating a $4.55 tax rate. Then you ask, well, what would happen if we cut out a big scope of project? So I looked at, just for instance, what happens if we remove the Ptarmigan Ridge project. That's about $23 million. So it dropped the overall package to $127 million. That would reduce the estimated cost down to $2.28, 56 cents less than what we had previously estimated, or 21 cents less than the $150 million package. So what does 21 cents cost the average homeowner? About $8.30 per month would be the difference between the $150 million package and the $127 million package. Then we did some math and say, well, what would happen if we don't come back in April and we push that out likely to November? And the current estimate is speaking with Matt. Now, this isn't a fine-tuned forecast because for him to think that, he has to look all the way into 2027 to see how much are things compounding over time. But he said, probably I would, at the minimum, guesstimate a 10% increase. So any kind of delay past April would definitely cost the taxpayers more dollars. There's no way around that. And any delay past April would push our overall timeline back by a year. And our experts are here and we'll do a facilities update so you can answer more, or ask more questions and get answers later. But the $165 million package, even with that timeline push, would still be less than what we previously projected. Because if you remember, we built that modeling and the board, what you said is we don't want tax rates spiking over time. We want to see them to stay consistent. So that's why we built that forecast in so that we don't surprise voters down the road. So that $200 million package, even at that higher price point, would still be less than what we previously forecast. So those are some data points for you. So all scenarios point to what we could say to voters on a second run, that we would anticipate the price per thousand to be less. But what would happen if we cut Ptarmigan Ridge? So we did our forecast estimates. This just came in. As a board, you asked us to really look and see what boundaries would look like over time. And whether you look at an on-pace schedule or whether you look at a delay, I can't really highlight that for you with my laser pointer, but we are somewhere between 2028 and 2030, between 1,600 elementary students and 2,000 to 2,100 elementary students. So the question I would posit to you, if you were considering taking Ptarmigan Ridge out of the package, what would that school look like if it had 1,000, 1,100, or 1,200 elementary students? We know it was built for 460. So that's kind of the weighing of a decision. Would $8.30 a month turn a no into a yes? And or what would the learning environment look like if we were building, filling a school 300% over its design capacity? And how would those impacts play out? Because what I can promise you is no matter what decision you make, there's going to be people that are supportive and people that will not be supportive. And I don't minimize for a second the financial impact that people are feeling in this economy. Would it be better in November? Those are the considerations you have to weigh. So we wanted to bring some data to you so you just have that to think about. Then I would encourage you to ask questions of our experts, and then I'd be happy to gather more information from either Piper Sandler or our experts as you weigh that decision. What you would need to do is decide and pass a resolution probably by next Thursday so that we could hand deliver to the election office by Friday. And we will prepare whatever resolution that you give us direction to do. So hopefully that helped give you some insight to your questions and I added more into your Friday update. On a positive note, we have an anniversary. Miss Carrie Thibodeau, we got a certificate on your behalf from WASDA, the Washington School Directors Association, and you have a 5-year anniversary of serving as a board director, so it's my pleasure to share with you a certificate honoring your recognition and contributions to school service. I think you got 5 more in you, but I don't want to jump the gun.
That's really cool. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Looking at what's happening in schools, we're starting kindergarten registration early. One of the pieces to the comment early is that all of our staffing really depends on our enrollment forecast. As enrollment grows, so does our staffing, so we can fund secretaries and custodial and all sorts of other positions. So we started early, that's open this week, and we're hoping to get accurate projections so that we can do our best to align our staffing to our numbers. One of the ways that we both support and build around your school goals and district goals, particularly around agency, is to just name it and celebrate it and recognize it. So Orion Primary, there's a picture of their trade of the month, which was around perseverance, which fits a little bit under that grit and agency component. Thinking about a highlight from the last time, there we have AJ. and Toby, country singer named Sheep. That is always a highlight. I know you love seeing and hearing from our students and from our staff, so I just thought I'd put a reminder that our next stop and that visit will be Ording Primary, Thursday, March 2nd. Christy swears that she can outdo the high school with some very cute kindergartners. So we're going to see if they top the list. I don't know, but she is determined. Just looking a little bit, one of the honoring of our tradition and our heritage is just alumni recognition. So we were able to recognize and honor the 40th anniversary of the 1983 state championship basketball team. Here we have a picture of our alumni with our high school students at one of the recent competitions. And they were able to actually find the trophy from 1983 that the team earned, and so that we had different displays and memorabilia out there. It was a really cool event and fun to see them come back. That particular alumni group, by the way, just since the time I've been around Ording for the last decade or so, has been directly responsible for well over $200,000 of distribution of scholarships to local students, including not only current students, but alumni as well. So they've been very active since their time here. Thinking about just some competition, I don't want to steal Michaela's thunder, but we had several different groups or individuals qualifying for the state competition. Here we have Gracie qualifying for bowling. Bowling was new this year based on your not only allocation of resources, but your goal around really increasing student participation. State wrestling, 17 wrestlers and 3 alternates on the boys' side, 3 wrestlers and 1 alternate on the girls' side qualified. That is the most of any team, and they're hoping to obviously defend their state title. And we'll be watching for 2 days there. The finals will start at 3 o'clock Saturday. You all are on the pass list should you desire to attend. Knowledge will qualify for state. Once again, those students dethroned the staff. And we kind of gave them a run here at the end, but they took it. And they did really well at the regionals and headed to state here sometime soon. At the regional competition, they had a 1st and a 4th place finish. Our team is so big we had to split it in 2. So state will be next month in Wenatchee. The most students ever qualified for band, solo, and ensemble at the state competition, so we put some information out with them. Very excited about how they're going to represent Ording High. Not to be outdone, FBLA, with our own board representative up there, qualified for state competition recently, and doing an amazing job with what they're doing. Some other events happening around. We have a book drive, Read Across Ording, so we're collecting some books, hoping to do a distribution so that information is out. Hopefully see some great engagement at the elementary level there. And then rounding out my report is not me, but a special guest, and I think you have an idea of what is coming. Director Chris Willis, he just is an amazing individual. He has a few words that he'd like to share this evening.
All right. I didn't write this letter. Mr. Hatzenbuehler helped me out, and I used artificial intelligence. I did. Because, really, well, I put a few things in it, but I mean it all. So I'm going to be silly for a second. I wrote my wife a love letter, and I used AI in it, and she goes, "You didn't write this." But then she said, "I want to date the guy." Really. So I do want to read this, though. I did master, took a lot of time to kind of take a look at some of the details. I have a heavy heart. As I announce my retirement from my position as Executive Director for Student Support Services after 40 years of service. As an educator, I've been privileged to work with countless students, parents, and colleagues who've been inspired and challenged me every day. I am grateful for the opportunity I've had to make a positive impact on the lives of so many kids and people and community members. I'm proud of those successes, especially around promoting inclusive and equitable programs. The time has come, and I really want to spend most of my time, my whole self, not half of my time, not the middle of the night when I'm doing emails, but my whole self to my family and to focus on my health. As I reflect, I'm filled with gratitude for the support and trust that you've given me. I'm proud of the work that we've accomplished. I'm confident that the district will continue to support students and families through community partnerships and commitment to high expectations for all students, including those with severe disabilities. Please know my retirement is not an end, it is a beginning. I will always cherish the memories, and I know I've made a difference in the lives of so many people. Thank you for the honor, and it is an honor, allowing me to finish my career here in Orting. I call it the diamond in the valley. Diamond in the valley. I look forward to keeping in touch and supporting the continued success, honestly, of the programs. I've had a lot of ownership for all of those programs. And I really mean that. I hope that we can continue sometimes with the loss of leadership, that some of these things, but you can't allow the programs. You need to keep the high expectations, and my hope is that the parents will demand it. And so I really want to thank you so very much. I'm still around for another, it's not like I'm going anywhere for the next 4 months. But I am, this is the right decision. It feels right. But on the same hand, man, I had this special ed gig for 40 years. Holy jeez. I've been here almost as long as the whole special ed 94, 142, and 75. I've been at this since 83. And so I just want to thank you very much.
Well, Chris, I appreciate that feels right for you. It's difficult to hear because you've been such a valued employee and advocate and champion for our students and families. So I hope you have a blast in retirement. We'll make the best of these next 4 months.
I want to echo what Cliff said. As a teacher, you were the best special ed director I ever had the opportunity to work with, and my family is forever grateful for everything you've done for us. And I hope at your retirement I can tell the story of how I first met you when you had to come to my classroom and tell me that news.
That concludes my report.
Michaela, it's your turn for our student board representative report.
I kind of have like 2 sides to my report tonight. I obviously our wrestlers are going to state tomorrow. I'm actually going to go watch them because why not? And I went last year, and I feel like it's just kind of like an ongoing tradition for me now that I feel like I need to go. So I mean, here I've told you the statistics of how many kids are going. We have not a whole lot going on in February, or at least the end of February, but as of March, we're going to start our March Madness. So we'll have pickleball tournament, Smash Bros tournament, probably unified basketball, I don't know, something like that. A whole bunch of competitions going on, egg hunts. You know, you get the gist. So that's really cool. I think a lot of my role as a student representative is to kind of just tell you what the in and outs of are at my school. And I think that with the not passing of the bond kind of hit a lot of kids' reality this morning. Not my class, but 4th period leadership class has like a good 40 kids in that class currently. And Mr. Freeze actually came into my 1st period leadership class today, and he was like, so with this bond not passing, we might have to do portables next year. What are your guys' like opinions on parking? Like, who do you want to take up parking spots if the portable would go in the parking lot? And I think it was kind of a harsh reality for all of us to understand that either you expand your class sizes to the point where it's like kids are sitting on the ground, or we have kids that aren't able to get themselves to school because they can't drive or they can't park. And I think it was kind of just like a whoa moment for all of us, because we're all sitting there, we're like, which one's really better, you know? Like, do we want classes with 40 plus kids, or do we want only 100 parking spots where we have to figure out who's more valuable to get those parking spots, you know? And I think it just kind of sucked, because we were all just like, I think never really understood how much it affected us until like right then we were like, wow, that's insane, to the point where we're like, oh goodness, that's scary, you know? So I think that it's just, I think it's important for kids especially to see how much this would change what it's like at school, you know? And I think it was just kind of like a interesting moment this morning. So just thought I would bring that up and express what it was like to be in that situation where you were like, okay, those aren't really good options, you know? So, yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting. My son is a senior, and so he and his friends, this was their first time voting, and so it's been an interesting conversation and what it means to approve a bond and what it means to fail a bond and what are the repercussions. And for a lot of kids, I think, especially in the high school, they're like, oh, we're not going to benefit from that,
Right.
and it, you know, it's still sobering when you start to think like the impact is real and it'll be here like immediately.
Yeah.
You're
and
feeling it already.
even as a junior, I was like, oh, this isn't gonna affect me, and then it was like, well, now it's gonna take up whether or not I get a parking spot next year. Like, I'm gonna have to fight those sophomores for the parking spot at this point. I'm like, geez, I'll be showing up at 7 o'clock in the morning, and I'm getting a parking spot, guys. Don't worry.
There's a new breakfast club at the high
Yeah,
school.
I know, right?
Yeah, I think you're on my list to talk about what was the reaction from the kids and yeah, conversations are having. Thank you.
Were the kids surprised that it does?
Honestly, I feel like they kind of were. I feel like they didn't really know about it until it started to kind of go around, because they were like, they all kind of just figured it would pass. I don't know. It's kind of just, it was like really talked up. We were like, yeah, we're gonna pass it. So everyone just kind of figured it passed. And once they were like, it didn't, and we were all like, yeah. And they were like, oh. And then it was kind of like, well, what does that mean? Type of question, I guess.
Yeah,
Maybe that's a support group we can tap into.
yeah.
I like the question, what does that mean for me? City.
Yeah, we spend a lot of our communication on what are the possibilities, you know, what are the benefits and the gains with the bond. We try not to dwell on the what ifs if it doesn't, because you don't want to scare the community and you don't want to make false, you know, assumptions about what could happen. But here's our reality now.
Yeah.
And so some of those things that we don't like are now part of our future, depending on how we move next.
Exactly.
There's a reason we asked. There's a reason we were asking. And yeah, it wasn't for the fun of it, I can assure everyone.
Not just to spend money.
Not just,
Yeah.
because, you know, we're rolling in it, so.
Yeah.
Great. Michaela, thank you very much. And thanks for holding the fort down while Grace, I forget where Grace is at.
She is in Arizona.
Competition.
Mhm. Yes, she is. She will not be back till Tuesday.
Good for her, good for her. We wish her well.
And I appreciate that you give us the facts, the truth, rather than just trying to make it okay, because it's important for us to hear that too.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
I feel like it's important to share with you the amazing things that happen, but I think it's also
Yes.
important to share with you
Yes.
what goes on in an everyday life as a student at the high school. So.
Yeah, moving your board report, student board report up in the agenda was intentional so that community could also hear what you're reporting out. Before people tune out or log off or close the meeting, and we wanted to make sure that they heard what you were saying. So I appreciate your candid reports. All right, now I will turn it over to Matt and Liz.
slides tonight, and I was thinking that I'll just go into as much or as little detail as you want so that we can structure this around what is useful for you. So I think we talked earlier about some of the options you're considering, and so I'll kind of just share a little bit of the schedule of kind of what we were anticipating, and then how that might adjust based on different possible times of rerunning the bond, for example. Does that sound okay? I can, again, we can adjust this.
It may be off, sir.
Oh, yeah, that would probably, that makes a big difference. Okay. So what we have up here are a few schedules, and this first one is for the new elementary school. And one of the key points I'll just start with is the end date. So what we've been talking about all along is that the end date would be opening school in September of 2026. So that is really based on the biggest drivers, which are we have a number of permit things that need a long time frame, and we've talked about those quite a bit in the past. Those are still there. If for some reason those permit things go well, then we'll try to get it done as soon as we can. But I think the realistic time is September of 2026. So for the new elementary, if you run the bond in April, for example, we see no change in that timeline. There's still enough time to make that happen and get done at the same time frame. So you can have the same commitment to the voters if you ran it in April. If you decide to run another bond in, say, November or February of next year, then as you can imagine, especially let's just start with February, because that's a year away, you're going to have to push that out by a year. And that's going to be true of all three of the projects. When you run in November, that's practically a year, and really there isn't really a way to make up that time. So I think we would also need to expect that would be pushed out a year. Now, one of the things is we always think in terms of the school year, there's some flexibility in trying to adjust that. For example, if you ran in November, so I think if you said, we want to run in November, then we would take a close look and see, could we get done a little sooner and maybe have like a mid-year move-in or something like that. So those types of things are possible. For a November timeframe, I would say I wouldn't consider those possible for a February of next year timeframe in terms of the finished schedule. Does that make sense in terms of just the thinking on how the kind of key schedule piece works? So that thinking is going to apply to the other projects as well. So if you remember, PTR, we've been anticipating getting that done for opening in September 2025. So it's a smaller project, the permitting is more simple, and the construction is going to be able to go a little faster, all those things. So that timeline still, again, no change if you run in April. Again, we would have to change that if you ran again in November or the following February. And then lastly, again, high school, same thing. So the high school is a more complicated project because we have to do things in multiple steps, and it's just a more confined area. So again, we've built in extra time, and some of the key components to that are this pink line here, which is the construction time frame. So with that, we have a longer construction time frame to be able to get that done. So again, the timeline is the same as the new elementary school opening in September of 2026. Again, very comfortable. We 2 months change in that schedule. If you reran in April, that wouldn't change anything. We could still get done at the same time frame. And then there's quite a lot of other detail there if we want to go through that. Happy to do that. I did highlight a couple things that we were anticipating for the spring of this year. And for example, if you decide to rerun in April, then we would be compressing these things in a shorter spring time frame, right? Because many of these things we want to get done while staff and teachers are still here prior to summer break. There's some things clearly that we can do after summer break, and we'd be working continuously through the summer, but we want that input prior to summer break. So most of these things we can get done, and it will be more compressed, so we'll just have to work together closely to make sure that we can get the amount of staff and teacher and principal time that we need in the last couple months of the school year. So that's challenging, because as you get towards June especially, it's tough. So there's, you know, it'll be a little more challenging, but it's doable, definitely doable, so. So that's just a quick overview. I think that just those few slides is all I brought here tonight, with the intention that we could have just a conversation about anything that you are wondering. Maybe I'll just pick up on one other piece, which is the price tag. So one of the scenarios that you explored so that we would understand was the idea of, well, what would happen if you ran in November or next February? So, and that's where you were looking at, well, that's probably about a 10% more expensive to do that, because it's a year from now. November's not quite a year, but for all intents and purposes, it's more or less basically pushing out the project end date by a year, and that's kind of how we look at the cost of the projects, is by when's the end date. So part of it is a guessing game. I was just looking up, so the International Monetary Fund is expecting global inflation. This is not US specific, but global, at around just under 7% for 2023. So construction in this region has typically outpaced the national inflation rate. So I wouldn't pretend to predict exactly what the national inflation rate is going to be between, you know, for the next 12 months. It is definitely going down, which is a great thing, but so that's kind of why, just as a quick blush, we said, well, what happens if we need to assume a 10% increase? And I think that's what we would fine tune if you decide, let's rerun this in November, and then we'd know exactly what's the right number. We'd spend a little more time doing research on that. Does that make sense as well, in terms of how just thinking through the budgeting piece? Okay.
Is that worst case scenario, the 10%? Did we figure that probably high on that?
That's, in my mind, I think 10% is
Okay.
conservative. I would hope we wouldn't need to recommend going that high if you ran in November. So, and that's, again, we just wanted to understand how that would affect kind of the total dollar amount and then the tax rate associated with that. So I think it's a good starting point, and hopefully you wouldn't have to go quite that much. But there would definitely be an increase, and it would be sizable, you know. Again, the thing that is, even over the last, I don't know what you would say, 10-ish years, construction inflation has outpaced the inflation in the rest of the economy in our region. I'd say definitely for a decade or so, maybe longer.
One thing to remember is when we did a cost estimate, you know, was 3 months ago, 4 months ago, approximately, was, you know, by the time that was presented to the board, it was October, November timing. So really that cost estimate for the construction cost is now, if we run it in November, it will be a full year.
And yes, absolutely. And if you remember, we do build into those estimates that are in that $150 million bond, we build in an assumed inflation rate, so that you have, you know, contingency, knowing that over the course of those projects, over say 3-ish years, we're assuming that inflation. So that's built into that. It's just what's not built in is an extra year time frame that we would have if you ran in November. And so that's what we would have to account for. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because the projects would not complete in 2026, it'd be 2027. And so that's what we'd have to account for.
So, Ed, when you were talking earlier, there was some talk about the backlog, I guess, of the builders or construction companies or whatever that looked like, and kind of looking at that tax rate for the project if we were to take it in April, that we could still even potentially see a little bit of a decrease in that expected rate.
Do you want to go back to that slide? Would that be good? We could switch.
Yeah, we can go back to that.
Okay.
Sure.
To the superintendent slide.
No, now's a good time. So really there's a few considerations, I think, to inform your decision. Certainly not the least of which is what's the will of the voters? What's the will of you? What are the pros and cons and weigh? Because whatever decision you make, you'll have to be ready to answer to the community and champion the message. One question would be, in this bid package and what you've seen with the cost, we're estimating a certain amount of contingency price escalation between now and when we go to bid. So if you were to have approved in February, or if it were to be approved in April, it's still about a year before we go to bid. So we have contingency built in to cover and make sure, and that's why we advertise in the package a range in school size, and we might be able to do this if we can afford it, because we don't know what that will be. What I know, upon immediate approval, Liz, on your behalf, will start to shop amongst local contractors and try to build interest and try to get a lot of competition in a low bid scenario, because that would be more favorable for us as a system to get bids that were competitive, where people knew they were competing. What I wouldn't be able to predict is, would those bids be likely to come in a year from now, or would they be more if you were to push it out a year? We definitely think the overall project would be more. I don't have some insights in terms of that. But what we do see, and this is, I think, the benefit to the taxpayer, we just have to be able to explain it, is that by if you remember, when we built this modeling, it was based on the feedback from the developers about what is happening with the growth and enrollment forecast, and that's where we developed the three-phase plan. So bond number 1, bond number 2, bond number 3, so that we not only had adequate staffing, but adequate space to be able to house the children. So that second phase is what we thought would be in 2027, and we thought the price tag would be about $200 million. So when we built the pricing forecast for bond number 1, it included the consideration of the price of bond number 1, plus what would likely the tax rate be in bond number 2, so when we advertise to our taxpayers, we could be reasonably sure that we wouldn't increase that tax rate, we would at least be able to keep it steady, and then give them a reasonable forecast of what we thought that price per thousand would be. Again, voters approve amounts, not rates, but we try to guesstimate the rates as best as we can. Because if we're wrong in a bad way, we break trust. But I will tell you, you're always going to be wrong. There's no way, if I could predict it that well years down the road, that would be days. So thinking about the news that we received today, this just came in today, so our taxpayers really haven't had a chance to see this or consider it yet, but all three scenarios, whether we run the same package in April, a more expensive package in November, or a less expensive package in April, all three scenarios are less than we previously forecast. It's a major impact on the tax rate to push a $200 million bond a year down the road. Now, might it go to 2029? It could. We don't know how long interest rates will be high and what will happen with the development. We just know that we're operating on the most recent information from our developers as of a few weeks ago, with the most recent estimates as of midpoint today. So I hope that helps.
It helps a great deal, and I had my light bulb moment as soon as you said, you made the reference to the home builders, and that's where the delay was coming. It did not click earlier. I apologize. Sometimes I need to hear things 5 or 6 times before it clicks, but I got it. I got it, and that makes great sense.
And a misconception, because I've been asking a lot of people what they've been thinking. Some people thought that this bond made the commitment to the 20-year plan.
Oh.
I know, and but I'm saying that because they kept referring to, well, it's the 20-year, and I said, well, we want you to know that we have a plan for that. But that's not that, but they kept thinking it is the commitment to the 20-year plan. And so that was a misconception of how they heard that.
The one piece that will stay constant, so if you remember, bonds require a 40% validation of the previous general election. That number stays constant because that's based on November. So if you were to run again in April, we would still need 2,893 total votes in order to validate, and 60% of the total votes are required to pass. So somewhere in there, mathematically, you either need fewer no's or more yeses or some combination.
Now, we have the numbers up there for totally eliminating the PTR project, but another thing that you mentioned was just doing the gym.
Yes, you could. You could. The gym portion was about $5 million, so it would add a little bit more. What I wanted to share is just, like, in case the question comes up, what does that kind of do to the cost? And what is the cost to kids in housing should we make a delay? So I was hoping to share both of those for you. So it does about $100 a year is the difference in price of shaving off that 23 million to the average homeowner. And when I say average, that's based on last year's average price in our district, which was $475,000 house. So about $8.30 a month would be the difference in price point if we were to not include Ptarmigan Ridge in a rebate.
I want to thank you for those extra breakdowns that way, because taking the time to do that really does make the picture a little bit clearer, at least in my mind. When you talk about $8.35, I don't think necessarily that's going to change a no to a yes. So the time spent doing that was very much appreciated.
And again, that savings is over the projection from what we just ran, if you will. That way, you're comparing apples to apples. Those numbers are not Marcy Bannon approved, I will say. That's my own math. She might have that already double checked, and we might have a conversation after. We'll see. But I did my best.
Thank you very much for clarifying that.
You're welcome.
I had a question about the state, there's an $11 million match.
Yes.
Which against a $150 million bond is not a lot, but I was wondering if there's any impact to that if we adjust the time frame or the dollar amount of the bond package.
So the state does not match based on the dollar amount, they match on the allocation per square foot that they have. That does change each year. So if you delay a year, that allocation is scheduled to go up. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head. So there is a slight increase from that perspective. Again, the state matching funds are a very small percentage of the total you need to spend to do construction. So in my head, it's not a driver, that increase, but it would adjust. What we haven't looked at is what your state match funds would look like if you pulled PTR off. So for example, if you ran in April and you took PTR off of the package, I would expect your matching funds to go down because the way they look at it is there are unhoused students at PTR, and we would be housing those students, and therefore you would get some matching funds. But I'm trying to think this through. I'm not certain on that. I could be wrong because depending on the quantity of unhoused total, because they look at the total quantity of unhoused students between both schools. So I may be talking myself into saying it might not be a huge difference in state matching funds. But we would want to double check that real quick. If you said tonight, I'm really thinking about doing that, we would do a quick double check to be able to let you know if those anticipated matching funds are going to change.
My fear with shaving PTR out is that the students are still coming.
Yeah.
The student, like, we can't just turn off the faucet, and they're going to need a place to learn and to eat and have fitness class and band, and that need doesn't go away. Like I felt like this package was kind of the bare minimum that we needed just to support the kids we have today and those that are coming in the close immediate future.
Well, and at the beginning of the year, the thing that we heard over and over and over again was the effect that the cafeteria gym space was having on the day-to-day workings of schools. And people were very upset about that, as they rightly should be, you know. So this, besides taking care of other needs, also directly affects a need that people were very upset about. So, I thought of that when I was mulling all this over.
What other questions?
I was just wondering when I was driving in Sumner today, they're building the new high school, right? They're adding on to the new high school. Have you guys seen the new building that they've done in the Sumner High School? And I was wondering if they did a bond in phases? If that was phase one and then they have to go out again, does anyone know? I was just wondering if that was, like, they did one bond for phase one and then they're gonna do.
They did multiple, from my recollection. Their initial projections and their approved amount were not congruous, so their bid actually came in more and they had to rerun something to be able to complete what they originally discussed. That's my recollection. I'm not sure if that's true.
Okay.
But I think they intended to run it all in one, but it didn't bid at the estimated price point, which is why this is so important. And you're looking, as you know from this conversation, a year and a half down the road, trying to predict 4 years down the road.
Right.
So it's you're just making your best guesses, and love hearing your questions. That'll help us shape. Just conceptually speaking, we don't have a resolution for your approval, so I need you as a board to either provide some direction to the board president of what your wishes are, and she'll communicate to me whether or not we're in need of a special meeting request. We need at least 24 hours notice, and whatever your wishes are, we would need enough time to draft a resolution. Presently, we don't have a drafted resolution ready for consideration, so we would need to know your desires around same package or modification. We'll work with legal to prepare, and then if you say we'd like to set a meeting for public consideration, then we'll certainly do that. But we'd need at least 24-hour notice, and would have to happen before next Thursday, or at the latest next Thursday, because we would have to deliver next Friday.
So we're gonna meet as a group though and discuss?
This is the best time to ask questions.
But like, you know, just how you brainstorm together, are we gonna be able to do that? Or do we have just, if each one of us give our?
Yeah.
Either, I can't make that call as a board. You
Okay.
could
I like it when
discuss
we can
now
discuss.
and share it now, and you could think about it and
I mean,
communicate to
I
the
don't care
president.
when we do it, I just like it that we can listen to one another and see.
Yeah, this is our best opportunity for questions because we have all of our experts present. A special meeting next Thursday is a possibility. We could do that and have more conversation. But as Ed said, we have to file on Friday. So if we're going to get any additional community feedback, we have to do so by like Tuesday next week. That's something that I was interested in doing, whether we do a survey or a virtual town hall, something that we could do quickly that people could participate in and give us that opportunity for feedback. But if we're going to do it in April, we have until next Friday to make that decision. And our staff, they need time to get a modified resolution prepared with the lawyers if we're going to change it.
Because it wasn't on the agenda, we couldn't discuss our decision tonight, like afterwards or something. I don't know, I'm just asking.
Yeah,
No,
we don't
can't do that.
we don't have an action item to
Okay.
approve or a resolution
Okay,
to
that's
approve.
my question.
Yeah.
But can we bring up some of the things that you and I talked about? Can I
Other-
bring-
Yeah, and ask questions about them that,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay. I did make an effort to talk to a lot of people, just find out what they were thinking. And I, one of the things I came up with my neighbor who's involved in the senior center is that, yes, we gave them information, but apparently she thought it would be better to have repeated because there was a lot of confusion. The 20-year thing was some confusion. If we could pair it with the person that comes to talk to them about how to fill out the paperwork for
Exemption.
Yes, the
Exemption.
tax exemption, because a lot of them still didn't understand that. But if we paired it with that, that would be some actual assistance right then and there.
Hey Kathy, could I clarify our conversation, because you and I went down a path during that call of all of our ideas for communicating about the bond with whatever we do next.
Oh, okay.
So we absolutely want to have that conversation, but before we get to that point, we have to decide what we are going to do
Okay,
next.
okay, I was just
So,
saying that there
yeah.
was some of.
There's
some-
lots of great ideas
And some misconception.
yes.
Yes.
Yeah, kind of late Tuesday, there were a lot of questions that surfaced in social media that we had provided information for, but maybe people hadn't engaged in that information. So yeah, we have to do whatever we decide to do, we have to do some more education or provide more
Okay.
opportunities for people to talk. But let's decide what we're gonna do.
Okay, okay.
So now's the chance to ask questions about any of the options. You know, there's like an option D, which is to not run any bond and to continue operating in our current facilities. So I want to put that out there, that that is an option. I know with inbound students and our current condition of our facilities, and I feel like we're one electrical problem away from having to move out of OPS.
We are a toothpick break away from major issues, no
Right.
matter which way you look.
Yeah.
And I know that that's kind of a comment in jest, is to just not do anything. But my follow-up question to that would be, well, then what? I mean, where do you put the kids? We
Yeah.
don't have portables, we would have to go buy them. You need money for that, so,
Right. You need land to put them on,
We need
which
land.
we do not have.
yeah.
Which I think, I don't know, maybe I'm jumping ahead again, but we didn't want to scare voters, but I think facts are important, and I think now that we're looking at a second time, we do have to let people know this is what's gonna happen. These are some of the things that are gonna have to happen if we don't pass. We're not doing it to scare you, we're telling you the facts.
Yeah.
Because we didn't do that in this one, you know, as much. And so, but it's just a reality, and I think we owe it to them to know, when you vote, you're voting, and this is what our next, because everybody's asking what Plan B is, well, you know.
Yeah.
My concern is, moving forward to April would be, and it's to you guys, right, obviously in this, how are we with the same, right? If we decide we're rolling out with the same and we're just gonna go, how do we, right, change those votes? How do we get that little bit more that we gotta get, right? What's our strategy at that point moving forward?
I would say that the strategy conversation would not be held at this table or the district. We are able to communicate facts and send one mailer. That is going to be a question for Yes Committee to ponder. I would posit they would have some ideas, because I've already heard some have said ideas, but that would be a separate conversation. I think our initial challenge will be to really uncover some of the why and address that through our communication. I don't know how to communicate better or more. It's the best I've ever seen in my career. But even with that, there are people that we miss. And that's not to underestimate. No bond passed in the state. The people's concern around their finances and where that sits is weighing heavy, and I know it is, as is the predicament of what to do in our context. So I think we have to get a very quick handle and do some listening and some outreach, and then be ready to pivot and get that information out as fast as we can as a district, and figure out what the committee would like to do, let that take its separate course.
So one of the questions I had, after hearing, was what exactly could we change in our bond scope that still would put kids first and honor the support we do have? So I feel like when you're talking about taking PTR off the table altogether, besides what sounds really minimal in dollars per month kind of thing, is how do we do that and still garner the support that we've had for the original scope? It feels like there's no good way to take anything off the table, and Carrie, is kind of, you said it, it feels like we have the bare minimum out there. Even if you were to take, you know, some of what's needed at the high school, how can you take that out when she's talking about 40 kids and sitting on the floor, for goodness sake? So, and if they bring another portable in, then there's no parking and there's no traffic ingress and egress. How do you just do all that? And I just, and then if you were to decide that that was going to be done, how do you make that up? And when do you make that up? Because it's still going to be stuff that has to be done. When do you do it then? And how do we do it?
And at what cost?
Right.
If we don't, you know, if we decided to forego this and go in November, the cost goes up
Right.
So, you know, I feel like we have, or I don't feel, we do have an important commitment to our community to be responsible with their tax money and to be frugal and to think conservatively and strategically about how we utilize every dollar they give to our district through their tax money, whether it's levy, learning money, or bond building money. And to kick the can down the road and come back to the community and say, oh, by the way, it's another $15 million now. I feel, for me personally, not speaking for the board, I feel that would be an irresponsible response to the community. Like, that's not how I would spend my own personal money. You know, I have a savings account. I have money in 401k to support Mark and I and our family as we move forward. I've, you know, got money set aside for my students' or my kids' education. I planned, you know, as hard as it is, every paycheck to invest so that when the time comes, I can afford it. And I feel like I have to use that same mentality for our schools. Like you at some point you got to bite the bullet. Investing in my 401k hurts sometimes, but sometimes you got to bite the bullet so that you can survive down the road. And to me, that's what I'm asking the community to do, is to step up. And it's a hard step. There is no question about that. That's a big bill, but it's going to get worse. And our kids are going to pay the price, and they're going to be sitting on the floor, and they can't use a gym for class because the walls are crumbling. Like, it's not because we would love to have a wrestling gym. Right. You know, it's literally we can't have kids in class in the gym for fitness or weightlifting or to use it for an assembly because it's not safe for them. And so I'm going to calm down.
Oh, God.
I'm going to calm down and say we have a really important decision to make.
Well, is this when I talked to some people too, I asked questions. Do you want to?
Yeah, what'd you learn?
Well, one of them, a few of them said they just, I know it sounds kind of crazy, but they still don't, a lot of people still didn't get that if my house is this much, I'm going to look at about this much. It was like they didn't understand the formula. And I know that it was laid out several times, but and it's almost like you want to say, okay, if you have a house with from 400,000 to this 100,000, you know, then this is, yeah, this is where it's at. You know, be so clear about that because they were confused. They still thought that they still didn't understand about the bond that's being paid off. And I know that there was a lot of work into it, but that was one of the things that they were talking about. And then they also said that that some of them, I wrote them down, I'm not going to do this. Some of them they didn't know it was bare minimum. They kind of, when they heard the gym or whatever, they thought, oh, we want to add all these things, you know, and so just, you know, getting them for sure to understand that we're not adding all these things, you know, just like you said. I think that was another one. And still also the levy and the bond. It's still that confusion of what the levy pays for and what the bond pays for. And so I think,
and that's a really hard idea for people to wrap up their minds around, that we can't use levy dollars to pay for buildings. And because in your home budget, you just shift money between the different departments of your household, toilet paper versus groceries, and you know, you move money around. Even in a business, you have revenue coming in and you can allocate it to different departments. In education, we don't have that freedom.
Right.
So that's a difficult idea to grasp, and it is confusing for folks unless you're Marcy.
Yes, exactly. Or Ed, you know, but and so that and then the other thing that that I guess maybe we didn't elaborate on was traffic. And they were like, well, we can't even do the traffic now. What are we going to do with another school over there? And so I was trying to explain it, but they were still questioning the impact of the traffic. And so I guess just maybe making that, little, you know,
Yeah, maybe a map
Oh,
showing
maybe,
this is
I
a
don't
state
know.
highway,
Yeah.
state.
yeah.
These are the county roads. This little driveway over here, this is the school.
Yeah. I don't know, you know, and of course, we always have the problem of letting everyone know, because, you know, we did, like Ed said, we communicated, but somehow, some people just,
We missed the boat.
I will say, the very first topic that you talked about, that rate and what it means to myself as a homeowner that pays those property taxes. And I find that to be the biggest thing to wrap my brain around and to truly understand
yeah,
that.
it's,
And that when you put that, you know, 35 cents and $4.20, you know, overall tax rate for an estimate that's out there, and people do the math,
right,
and you're looking at, okay, so it's $150 a month.
right.
And that's a big
That's a lot,
chunk of
that's a lot.
change.
That's a big chunk.
But what's hard to understand and what's hard to grasp is that when you're talking about that rate and you're talking about a $150 million project, you're asking for the $150 million. You're not asking for the $2.84 per thousand of assessed value. And that when, as 10 houses come in and you have 10 families moved into those houses and they're taking over their 10 property taxes, that reduces my rate by a few
Right.
cents.
Yep.
And so 10 more reduces my rate a few cents more.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So it's trying to be able to understand, and I had to have a go around with myself to be able to actually get to that point. And I think that that's the biggest,
And, yeah, they're not, yeah, I think, you know, maybe we really, it would, you know, because what, there's been, you know, maybe start at, I don't know, 100,000, but this is, you know, the impact that it would have, because sometimes that's all people want to know, you know, it's like, how much more am I gonna pay a month, you know?
but I don't think you can actually get specific
You
on
can't
that,
get
because
actually-
you can't tell people what to expect and then have it not be that.
Right,
Because
but
then,
maybe like in a amount, I don't know.
The one thing that we showed when we were going through all this at the beginning was the tax rates in the surrounding areas, and I was amazed, although when I thought about it, that's why I had bought a house here, was the rate here compared to other places, that we were so economical. And I do think that's something that we ought to emphasize more.
Yeah.
Because that graph itself was like, oh, whoa, you know, we're down there, and we're low compared to all the surrounding areas.
But our students are no less important.
Exactly.
She wants to say something.
Yeah.
say,
Yes.
Okay.
please.
I guess, I know you said a little while back about how one of our biggest goals was to make sure that we didn't scare the community. And I sit here and I'm observing how you guys are like kind of listing the fears that you have for like what would happen if this didn't move forward, or what would happen if the walls literally collapsed on these children, or what is the extent to having kids sit on the floor in classrooms, or where does the traffic end up? I mean, you guys are listing all of these fears that you have, and I feel like, I guess I'm gonna track back a little bit, but I read this article a couple months ago for an English project about paradoxals, which are pretty much like the opposite or like contradicting statement that comes to provide more benefits. And I actually kind of looked it up more than we were saying because I wanted to make sure I was correct. And I looked up how much does fear pay into decision making. And it says that often risks are perceived to provide most to benefit. And I guess my question is at what point do we decide to really show the reality of what happens if this doesn't go through? So, at what point do we have to kind of, I guess, in a way, scare some of the people in order to understand this is the reality of what life is going to be like for these young children, and like not even just the kids, but your commute to work every day, how it's going to pay into like our community members and like the small businesses we have, and what is it going to be like to get 45 minutes from the school to the Buttes after school. I mean, it's insane. It takes me forever to get home, and I'm just like, where does that finally become a factor where we kind of have to push a little fear on people? Because, I mean, you guys obviously understand the fear of everything, and you see the ins and outs of it, but like, what happens to the people that aren't seeing the fears, I guess, is where I'm kind of like,
It's a great question.
where do we get to the point where we have to have other people see your guys' realities of it all? You know?
And I'm just sitting here and thinking, now how can we not do this? How can we not? How can we not? When we have students like you that are listening and doing their research as we're talking and are smart enough to say, this fits in here and this is what I think.
It also had something to do with my parents' conversation. I wasn't when my mom, when I was going there, Mom was like, where are you going? I'm like, I'm going to the board meeting. She's like, oh, I guess you guys are going to talk about the bond, huh? And I was like, yeah. And she was like, at what point do we just scare people? And I was like, Mom, that's probably not the best decision. And then I kind of like thought about it for a second, and I was like, I don't think she means it that way, but I wonder if I could put it into some different words, I guess, based off of
Like showing the true reality.
yeah,
You asked
it's
a really
not really a fear, it's a reality.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a reality, but you ask a really good question, so I'll tell you just from my little view, and one reason why I publicly don't talk about all the scary things is in the 5 years I've been here, I've seen our staff pull off amazing miracles, and so, you know, if I say we can't let outside groups use the stadium because there's not enough rubber dots in it to support use outside of just our specific school use. Like, imagine the stadium being closed to this community because we have used it long past its usable life. Like, now there are not enough rubber dots for kids' heads to bounce off of that rubber. And I'm being dramatic, but
It's true.
it's true.
No,
It's
that's
true.
entirely true. We're
And,
very close to that point.
you know, we have a community that loves that stadium. It's our pride and joy. I think it's the best. But to say, sorry guys, there's a padlock on this gate. So there's the scares, and then just when I think the worst is the worst, our staff comes through with amazing creativity and they find a way. The problems that we're talking about are not new this year. They have been in the works for years, decades, before, you know, long before any of us were here. It's just been this steady, gradual decline of our facilities in need of investment. We got organized and we're like, this is it. This year we're gonna ask. So I don't wanna lean into the scare things because sometimes miracles happen. You know, our team finds a way, and
But when do the staff stop and
yeah,
say this is
there's
enough?
nothing left.
You know,
There's
I mean,
literally nothing
we're
left.
asking them to teach classrooms
Yeah.
that are full. We're asking them to come to
Yeah.
practice at 6 in the morning. We're asking them, when do we say
Yeah.
it's enough?
Yeah.
You know,
When I asked Curtis in maintenance about the boiler, and he looks at me like Director Thibodeau, like he's got no words,
yeah,
and I'm just like, okay,
She's dying.
it's that bad.
yeah, yeah,
It is that
that's,
bad. There's no
yeah.
boiler replacement on
Yeah.
Amazon.com.
Yeah.
So,
And I guess, I mean, I've seen that firsthand, because, I mean, school, I guess. I'm part of leadership, and a leadership, like, my, like, school student class representatives or whatever, they do a lot for their class, and we do, like, class competitions or whatever. And it's hard to, like, see those class members doing all the work for this whole class. And I think it just becomes, I guess you can relate it to this, like, how much do we want to put on our teachers and our staff members before they're finally like, I can't,
Yeah.
anymore.
And sometimes that encourages people with their magical thinking. I mean, when I went to the little kids wrestling thing at people don't know that we can't use it because they get to use it on the weekend. You know, we're ready up, but they don't realize that we can't use it. You know, so sometimes some of those risks, I think, maybe they'd rather not know, but some of the risks, they wrap themselves. I heard so much about the piebald deer. We're going to get rid of them by building there, and I'm thinking, well, let's just make sure that when we talk about the egress through the forest along the river and the paths and all that, that we make sure that we include. No, the piebald deer is still, will still be here because that was a risk they were not willing to take, losing that.
And in a way, we're actually doing a disservice by not telling them what's gonna happen. Because what if it happens? And then it's like, oh, surprise, you know? So I feel like we have to be honest both ways. I don't wanna be this big negative person, but I do want them to know, we're not joking around here, you know? This is serious.
Yeah.
And we can't do that if we don't give them some harsh realities of what we're all looking at. I don't think, that's my opinion, but, you know, that's just how I feel because.
I think that was something that was universal in the conversations I've had with all of us, is that we don't, it's transparent communication. Like, number one, we are committed to that throughout this, so the good, bad, and the ugly.
Yeah.
We hijacked Matt's report, which I appreciate, and we're all very, you know, emotionally connected to this, and also it's our responsibility to decide what's next.
Yeah.
So, I'm hearing a couple things. Number one, I think we need to have more conversation, but if there's any more questions, now's the time to ask. I know it's important to me that we do go back to the community and ask for more input, one more opportunity for them to share with us their views. So I will ask that of staff, please, to find a way. You're not in focus, now you are. Find a way to get, just let's ask. We've been committed to that community engagement
Where we
and
missed.
feedback.
Are you thinking a survey or something?
I'm not sure what's possible with such a short timeline, so I will let the team at the district office decide. If it's a virtual Zoom meeting again, like we just had, I'd be happy to sit in on that as well.
If I were to recommend, based on your feedback, what I heard is some opportunities to engage in dialogue. I don't think this survey is the best tool for that. I would more advise you to move towards like maybe a town hall open Q&A where people could interact with you. If you would like other staff members present, then we can talk offline about who else we would like to invite. But we would need to work in a very timely way, probably tomorrow with Ms. Brittany to schedule that and get that set up. So if your desire is prior to action consideration, which is what I think I heard, then Tuesday would probably be a date. And the question would be, would you all be available? And if so, we will work to set up some talking points and communication. Tuesday at 6?
Yep.
Same time?
Same time, yep.
Okay, and virtual is what I think I heard.
Yeah, I think that would be the easiest way on such short notice for families to engage and anybody else who might be interested. I appreciate that feedback. I think right now it's important, if there's any additional information that you feel you need in order to help with this decision, now's the time to ask.
I feel like between Matt and Ed, that all of my questions, and I'm fairly clear, so.
Okay. Between now and Tuesday, if anything comes to mind, let's make sure we're communicating quickly, so we give staff and Ed enough time to ask, you know, whether it's lawyers or Matt or Liz or Trevor about funding, anything. I appreciate the work prior to this meeting, digging up some of these questions that we've had in the last day. Has it only been a day or two?
I do have one question. Is there any way we communicate this to the students? Because that's some valuable information. Then
Yeah.
can we communicate at the high school that, hey, guys,
Yeah, extend the
Let me hear
invitation
from
to
you.
students, whether it's if it's a virtual meeting, that link is open to anyone. So I would absolutely encourage high schoolers to ask questions.
can they make that in the announcements, or is that not okay?
No, it's perfectly acceptable. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
We can do that via Parent Square or announcements.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I think it would be valuable for parents to hear also from what the students.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yep,
I
absolutely.
feel like a lot of what parents' decisions can come from or what really is happening with their children.
Yep. Okay.
Is there a way to send out, probably each building saying that we're gonna have it so that all parents will know about it? Okay, so like we'll send it out to each.
Yes, to your question, Director Tracy, a Parent Square push would be all of our current stakeholders. We actually have the ability to communicate to inactive students as well,
Okay,
if we have that contact information. And then via the website, social media, and reader board are typical tools to get to people that aren't within our constituency.
okay.
Okay. Matt, thank you for opening up the conversation and for both of you being here to
Yes.
answer questions and for supporting us through this journey. I've been telling
Yes.
everybody we're on a journey. It's not a one and done kind of party. We are on the journey, and kids are our focus. So thank you for helping us with that conversation. Okay, we made it to item 3 in the report. This is the financial report. Thank you, Matt and Lee. Any questions on that?
No.
Thank you.
Marcy's a whiz.
Yeah, Marcy's a whiz. Joanne, I saw your question, and was it answered? Well, great. All right. Speaking of money, the next item is our budget planning process. Draft. This one is prepared by, and it's very detailed. 2 pages of dates. Was there any feedback or questions on this?
I just appreciate how thorough we
Yeah,
are
yeah.
in planning this out, and that's kind of apparent then what happens every year when we get audited, because these ladies are so.
Yes. All right. And we did have, Director Rab, are you presenting tonight? Yes, withdrawal prior to graduation.
This is the annual report that comes out from last year's data as to what our kids that withdrew early before graduation and where'd they go and what do we know about them. So that's the information that we have from last year. We don't present student names to the board, but we do have names, and every one of those data pieces reflect a student that the high school staff have gone searching for, and when we can't find them, and we have an obligation to report that. So I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
So have most of them been through the kind of the credit retrieval process or online and then they go missing?
And the ones you see at the top there, these are kids that were actually leaving our system and supposed to go to another system, and then they disappeared. And we didn't receive requests for records from them. And then we had a couple of kids that were actually in the retrieval programs and dropped out.
Okay.
We had one kid that's still there.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And our insurance report. This one is also prepared by, were there any questions? No. All good? Thank you, Ms. Bannon. All right, we have our second reading of policy considerations. Is there any final discussion on these? If not, then I will ask for a motion.
A motion to approve the second reading of policy considerations.
I second it.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
And these pass. We have consent agenda, which we did have that one personnel modification at the beginning of the meeting, so that's now included in this. If there's no further discussion on any of these items, I will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve items 1 through 8 on the consent agenda.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Consent agenda passes. I want chimes on this. This next item is public school employees, PSC or union, the salary schedule revision request. And I will need a motion for that.
I move to approve the 2022-23 PSE wage schedule as presented to include updated wage levels for the computer tech positions retroactive to September 1 of 22.
I second it.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Next item is our lacrosse stipend request. Prepared by, yep, no discussion. So we'll entertain a motion if there's no questions.
I move to approve the lacrosse stipend request as presented.
Second.
Seconded, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. And now we have our surplus request. Unless anybody wants to hang on to this stuff. I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve the disposal of the surplus items as presented.
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Let it go. All right. And we made it to board comments. Any last thoughts? I just want to appreciate staff and all of you for all the conversations we've had. It was an emotional Tuesday night for all of us, I think, and it just, we've got a lot more things to talk about. So.
That was my only comment for tonight too. Matt kicked us out tonight and then he just promptly left.
I know.
For as tired as I was on Tuesday night, and I was so uplifted, I think I left the sign holding saying, "We are the Chiefs," and we were not. But our staff and our volunteers and our students deserve the best that we can give them, and I was just reminded of that tonight and yesterday by Ed. And I couldn't be more grateful for the positive people that we have surrounding us. And like Matt said, you know, and how can you not? I'm just, seriously, how can you not? And I am so incredibly grateful for everybody's hard work, and so proud of this district. And it might have been a bad night, but that's okay. We'll bounce back. You remember those Boppy toys, you know?
Yeah.
Boppy the clown. Swing back up, okay? But
I hated those.
We're a resilient group. So.
Well, now that I can talk, because, you know, I am not an emotional person, but I was emotional tonight. So I just want to tell Chris, I'm going to miss you a lot, and I appreciate so much all that you've done for our district. I mean, you've just gone out of your way every single time, and our kids have benefited, and our staff has benefited, and we're going to really miss you.
Also gonna miss the laughs.
I second that.
I just want to say the district and everybody that was involved trying to get this passed, everyone stepped up and they were doing. We did take a beating, but I think we're going to step up and we're going to show that we can get this done. It just makes us dig a little deeper. And we got this.
Yeah. I told Melissa if it was easy, it'd be boring.
Exactly. If it just passed on the
Wrong and boring, right?
We're such great team. All right. Well, with that, I will adjourn tonight's meeting at 7:40.